What is up, boys and girls on YouTube? It is your host, Joseph. Man, it feels so good to be back. I have not posted a video on this channel for three months. Wow. So anyway, guys, it's great to be back, and we're back with some hot content. It's me talking about more controversial stuff, a great way to get angry comments, death threats, and everything else on YouTube. So I'm excited to see how many people are gonna hate on me for the controversial stuff I talk about in this video. You gotta love hate comments. They're the funnest ones to delete. So anyway, what I want to talk about in this video is I'm not Einstein. I'm not a genius. And I'm not even right half of the time. But I really believe that I have found what could just be the factor that can make or break your video game. You see, what I did is I began to look at a lot of Christian video games with bad reputations, and in almost every single case, I saw a similar factor. And then I began to look at Christian video games with mostly good reputations, and I saw the exact opposite factor. Two factors that are total opposites. It seemed like all the video games with one of the factors had a bad reputation, and all the video games with the good reputation had the opposite factor. To tell you what this factor is, let me ask you a question. What is the single most important part of a video game? Is it the graphics? The music? The level design, maybe? No, it's not any of those, bro. It's the gameplay. The gameplay is the single most important part of every video game. It is the reason people play video games. I have seen many video games with low quality graphics, bad music, but good gameplay and amazing reaction. Think of mobile games, for example. So many mobile games have incredibly low budgets and bad graphics, but the gameplay is so catchy that millions of people play these games. I'm telling you, bro, listen to me, bro. All of you haters out there, it's all about the gameplay, bro. But then again, I've seen video games with $1 million budgets, millions of dollars, beautiful graphics more beautiful than my non-existent girlfriend, so beautiful, and yet bad gameplay, and thus horrible reactions by the critics. So because of all of this, it makes sense that the fastest way to get a horrible reputation is to mess up the gameplay. Forget the graphics, we'll worry about that later. The music. The fastest way is to mess up the gameplay. So the question is, have Christians done that with Christian video games? So this brings me to my theory, and this is my theory. Anytime that you put message inside of gameplay, your game is going to be brutally murdered by the critics. So let me explain myself for a couple seconds. Let's talk about what do I mean by gameplay, because that's kind of a broad term, gameplay. So what exactly does that mean? So gameplay is basically how the game runs. It's what makes the game fun. It is the reason people play games. Think of a game like Mario. Alright, so what's the gameplay of Mario? The gameplay is Mario jumps on his enemies to kill them. He hits blocks with his head to break them. He touches coins to collect them. He eats mushrooms to get big. And he does this all the while jumping over pits and obstacles to make it to the end of the level. That's the gameplay. That's why people play Mario. People don't play Mario for the graphics or the music. They do play it partially for that, but mainly for the gameplay. Gameplay is the mechanics of the game. And so when you put message inside of a gameplay, it's gonna mess up. You can put it in the story, you can put it in the level design even, you can put it even in the music, and it'll be great. But put it in the gameplay, and it will mess up. And don't get me wrong, Christians are all about message, and we have to. We have the greatest message of all time, of bringing the gospel to every creature. That's our message, that Jesus Christ loves you. You can come into this gospel truth today. That's our message. And we've got to tell it to people, even through video games. But when you try to do that through the mechanisms of the game, it will fall apart. So let's take a look at a couple games and see if Christian video games actually do this catastrophe. Alright, so I got a list of several video games that, in my opinion, have pretty bad reactions, and we're judging this on secular critics. Christian critics are gonna like them just because it's a Christian game, but secular critics will be more honest whether it's actually a good game or not. Okay, so we're gonna look at what's probably the most hated Christian video game of all time. Very possibly. Catechumen. It's been out for a long time. But Catechumen, in my opinion, has the potential, or had the potential, to be a great video game. It could have been amazing. It had a good setting, ancient Rome. I mean, a weird setting for an FPS game, but it could have been very, very interesting. The graphics were mediocre, but they really weren't horrible for the early 2000s. But now, think of what a classic FPS should have for gameplay. Now let's look at Catechumen. So instead of killing enemies when you shoot them, you save them. The Roman guards are coming up trying to kill you, and you shoot them. Instead of killing them, you save them. That's an example of putting message in the gameplay. How you shoot and kill enemies is gameplay. And so they put the message of saving people into the gameplay. You might think, how in the world is that wrong? We want to save people. It's making the game less violent. Killing them would be violent. But think about it. When you do this, think of how corny that sounds to the very people you're trying to reach through your video game. And he's watching this game from a secular standpoint. He's going to look at that and say, that's so corny. So let's look at some of the other parts of the gameplay. Instead of shooting with actual weapons, you shoot with spiritual weapons. Your main weapon is the sword of the spirit. You're shooting with the sword. Normal FPS game mechanics would have you shooting with a gun. That's what makes sense. Instead, you're shooting with the sword. That's not the worst part of the game, but again, that's putting message in the gameplay. It's corny, and people criticize it because it seems kind of dumb. Another part of the game, when you pick up health, it pops a Bible verse on the screen. You have to read a Bible verse to get your health. Especially when you force people to do this, that's what makes video games seem preachy. And multiple games have done this, and I think it's a bad idea. Another example, this game was very, very controversial. Some people literally told Walmart to stop selling this game. It was so controversial. Left Behind. I've never played it, so I don't really know a lot about it. It seems like, again, it got widely criticized because the gameplay looks kind of dull, but it has a lot of good examples of what not to do inside of a Christian video game. One of the first things, I don't know if this is true because I've never played it, but I've heard it basically teaches a convert or kill mentality inside of the game. So the whole goal of the game is to convert people. And that's a great example of how you're putting message inside of the gameplay. Gameplay is literally to convert people. When you have a gameplay thing like that, yeah, it's gonna seem like it's just oriented for Christians and it's really preachy. But we'll overlook that real quick. So I don't know if it actually teaches convert or kill. You're trying to convert them and they don't, you kill them. I don't know. If it did, that would be pretty horrible. To increase one of your stats in the game, you have to pray. That's part of the gameplay mechanisms.
You just ran out of health. Now you must pray or you will die.
How dare you tell me to pray? I am an atheist. I never pray for anything.
Then you will die.
But I'm gonna die. I don't want to die. I'm not gonna pray, okay? It's just not gonna do it.
Let's just say, maybe that's not bad to do in every case, but you can't do that inside of a video game and expect secular people to like it. If you're gonna put message in the gameplay, you have to say, okay, this is oriented just for Christians. And I don't think this game was designed just for Christians. Okay, so I've jabbered enough about that. So those are some great examples of putting message inside of gameplay. So now we're gonna talk about some games that, in my opinion, have pretty good reactions. Again, they still have mixed reviews online, but I feel like overall, numerous secular people have said these are pretty good games. So we're gonna talk about them together. Anytime that you get criticized for your gameplay and not for your message is probably a good thing because it means people are actually taking your game seriously. And that would be these games here. The first one, Chronicles of the Aetherlight. It's not a perfect game. There's one or two things in the game I don't really like. You can check out my review on the channel. But the Aetherlight is a great example of a game that keeps message out of the gameplay. It's just a straight up good top-down game to play because the message is told through dialogue, through the story, and through cutscenes. It's a great example of a game that doesn't put too much message inside of the gameplay, but just keeps gameplay what it should be. It's just simple, fun, top-down gaming. Because at the end of the day, people want to play a fun game. They're not looking for a message inside of the game. They're looking for a fun game. Another video game is 5, Guardians of David. Again, not a perfect game. Got criticized a lot for being too easy or repetitive in the gameplay. This is one of the best examples I can think of in a game, though, that manages to keep gameplay as good old gameplay. It's just a good old hack and slash game. The gameplay is not trying to preach a message. It's not trying to tell you anything. You don't have to read Bible verses to gain health like any other game. You're just playing it for the fun of it. And the story is very good and very powerful, but the message is told through the story, through dialogue, and through cutscenes. That's the common factor you will see in video games that I believe have done it right. The good video games seem to tell the message through dialogue, cutscenes, and story, while the games that seem to be most widely criticized try to tell message also through the gameplay. And I just want to say, even if you do go through the process of saying, okay, I'm not going to put message in the gameplay, that's not a magic spell to say your game is going to go viral. Because a lot of games have great gameplay and just don't make it. Or a lot of games have good balance between gameplay and message, but still the gameplay is not that good. And so it's not a magic spell, but I believe this is one of the key problems in Christian video games, and I felt like it had to be approached. And so I wanted to make this video. And so this is my message to all Christian game developers. Put as much message as you can without getting corny, but keep it in the story, the dialogue, keep it in the cutscenes. Don't put it in the gameplay unless it actually makes sense and fits the game well. That would be my message to everybody on YouTube and every Vimeo, Facebook, all these other websites. So anyway, guys, sub the channel. So anyway, guys, subscribe to the channel or Thanos will attack you and the Avengers will attack you too because they're buddies now. I don't know what I'm saying. But anyway, thanks for checking out the video. Blow up the chat below. I want to hear what you have to say about this. And with that, no further ado, voila, bye-bye.